for that very detailed presentation and overview of the front end of the EMM survey metadata registry. So what I'm going to be doing is actually building on what she had presented, specifically by focusing on how we've made our registry sustainable and updatable as easily as possible. And for us as a cost action, this was really important for us to consider because our registry, we really wanted it to be a tool that would be not only relevant and useful for current users, but also future users. And how we really approach this question is by thinking about how we would design and set up the back end of the registry. And for those of you who are not familiar with the term backend, that just means the area or space where you actually manage all of the information that you're able to see on the front end, which is what Laura had presented. And more specifically for us, that means it's the space where we're actually able to manage and update the survey metadata records we have. So it was all the detailed information you saw for each survey that we have already identified, as well as the actual metadata variables. And those are, again, very specific pieces of information that we've collected for each survey. Since this presentation is really focused on showing you the backend, I'm just going to present to you the general flow of how this presentation will go. I will just say two things. First, if you are able to just hold your questions until the end, that would be very helpful in just making sure the flow is not disrupted. But unlike the front end, because the back end area is not accessible to all of you yet, it's not in the same development state as the front end. Do let me know if you can't see something clearly or it's not showing up well, because it really doesn't make sense for me to present all these different functionalities if you can't see it here, because when you go home, you won't be able to look at this information on your own quite yet. The second point, which I've somewhat kind of touched on already in my first point, is that because the backend access isn't available to all of you yet, I will make sure that you have access to this presentation, because what I've tried to do is at least capture the main functionalities that we have, so that when you're at home and you have some free time and this is of interest to you, you can also take a look at how we've designed the backend, and you can share with me your thoughts and feedback via email if that's of interest to you. All right, so in terms of the outline, I'm going to begin by just explaining how you actually access the backend. Then I'll quickly go over the different user types, because as you'll see, different types of individuals are going to be accessing the backend. Then I'll describe how you actually edit existing survey metadata records, and as you saw already, we have records uploaded onto our registry, so we have to have a mechanism in place to actually be able to modify them if we get new information, or perhaps we've miscoded one of the variables. I'll also explain how you delete a record if that's ever needed. I'll also spend a bit more time explaining how you add in new survey metadata records, because this is the piece that really we hope we get a lot of stakeholder buy-in, because this is a critical piece in making sure that our registry is adaptable and really capturing the scope of surveys that exist across Europe, but hopefully globally. And then lastly, I'll talk very briefly about how we are able to modify the set of metadata variables that we've set up for this registry. So in terms of actually accessing the back end, we are using a platform called Laravel Nova. And this is the same, oh, I guess I'm already logged in. Log back out so you can see. This is the kind of welcome screen that no matter what kind of user you are, this is what you would be presented with. And every user will be provided a login. That's the email address that you choose to provide, plus the password. The password will first be administered by the central team managing the registry, but then you'll have the option to modify your password as well as retrieve it if you forget it by chance. Let me just quickly. So that is what it looks like once you log in. So as I explained, there are different types of users, and they, just for our purposes, they are super administrator, survey administrator, and survey editor. They're quite confusing. You don't have to remember these types of user types, but it's just to be transparent with you that we've thought about the different levels based on the types of users we have. So the super administrators and survey administrators, those are really specific to the parties who are going to be very involved in managing the actual registry on the back end. The main distinction between the super administrators and the survey administrators is that the super administrators have additional rights. So in addition to just being able to do all kinds of editing, viewing, additions to the survey metadata records, they're able to actually modify the metadata variables as well as the users of the registry. The survey editor, and that's probably the one that is most applicable to everyone in this room, this is the user level that anyone who will be adding to the registry as an external party would be given. And what this user type allows you to do is view all the survey metadata records on the back end. So it's the same information that you would see on the front end. Edit only the records that you yourself have created. So for example, if you produce the EU-MIDAS survey, we would assign that, or if you produce the record for the EU-MIDAS survey in your country, then you would be assigned as the editor for that survey, and then you would subsequently be allowed to make additional edits to that survey record if you need to. You'll also have the permission to add new surveys to the records, and then finally you'll be able to edit your personal login information. For example, if you decide to change your email address and you need to update that, you don't need to go through the administrator, so you can do that yourself. So in terms of how you actually edit the existing survey metadata records, again, because most of you will be accessing the backend through the survey editor, what I've done is try to use this interface of the backend to kind of describe to you the functionalities. I'll only use the super administrator interface when describing the one functionality that's limited to that user type. So in terms of editing an existing record, you would go to the surveys button here that appears on the automatic kind of front page or welcome page that you're presented once you access the backend. And immediately what you're presented with is a list of all the existing surveys that we have already in the registry. And then as you'll see, there's different types of descriptors provided so you can quickly understand what kind of surveys are there. So we have the country name, the status, the names of the survey, whether it's national or subnational, when it was updated, etc. For survey editors, again, since you're only able to modify records that you yourself have been assigned or attached to, you'll notice that that indication is provided by this pen and paper icon. Everything else, you just have the eye icon. So it is set up in a way where you won't accidentally modify someone else's record. We make sure that only the records for which you have been attached to are editable by you. So in the case if you're interested in editing a record, perhaps maybe you didn't have information on where the data set was stored and now you do, you can click on this icon and then it will take you to the full kind of description page of the record. So here I'll just kind of point out the main areas and then I'll also show you what the actual full form looks like. But at the very top we have the status of the record and whenever you go to edit an existing record, it'll automatically change from published to draft to indicate that it's in editing mode. As Laura mentioned, we also have 11 different sections for our metadata. So this is where we indicate here the specific section name. All along the left-hand column, we have the actual names of the metadata variables. And then for each metadata variable, we have a response field provided. They take the form of either open, closed, or mixed. And by mixed, we mean it's open to a certain degree. So if it's sample size, you put in a numerical value. But if you don't have a numerical value to provide, then we want you to code it specifically as -9, don't know, or -99, information not available. And you'll be provided with those preset options. We've also tried our very best to provide as much help, instruction as possible embedded into the form, so the form is not too confusing and overwhelming, particularly for someone who has not been involved with us through this survey metadata work that we've undertaken through Work Group 1 and Work Group 2 of this cost action. And the help text, just so you know, it really mirrors the information that we have provided in the more comprehensive guidelines document that we've put together about the overall survey metadata compilation work that we've undertaken as a cost action. So just to show you what it looks like. Find the one survey here that's editing. I guess maybe it's. I'm trying to find the one that's been assigned as edit. I guess maybe.
You posted like
I
3
did.
pages ago. 3 pages ago. Yeah.
That's going too quickly. Is it really on the first page and I just passed it? You're right. Here we go. Okay. So again, this is just kind of to show you how it looks like in its full form. So it's exactly the same as the screenshot that's on the presentation, but this is just the full form. And as you can see, it's quite a lengthy form, and it is again because it mirrors the actual Excel template that we've been using for the survey metadata work, but just now in the online format. So, just one final point. Okay. So once you're finished modifying the record as you want, you will want to save your work, and for that you would want to click on Update Survey. Update and continue editing obviously is if you want to save your work and you want to continue to do more editing of the record. As a survey editor, the only thing you can really do once you modify a record is to save your work and then to notify us, the central team, that you've done these edits, because it will just remain in the draft status, and it requires the central team to actually check the modifications that you've made to then switch the status from draft to publish. And we've set it up this way so that we can still continue to do some version control on our end, make sure that the record hasn't been substantially modified or edited by the user. But we will need to figure out a bit more concretely what this kind of version control process will look like. For example, we don't know how we will display, or if we'll be able to display when the net record has been updated since it was initially uploaded to the registry, for example. Those are things that we need to discuss a bit more concretely with Young Minds, which is the IT company that we're working with to develop the registry. Sometimes there might be a situation where we need to delete an existing record. So for example, if a survey producer or distributor comes to us and says, actually we've changed our decision, we don't want to have the survey record displayed on your registry anymore. It's unfortunate, but it might happen. In that case, we would be able to delete that record. This can only be done by a super administrator or survey administrator, and what we would do is just click on the trash bin icon, and that will automatically pull the record from both the front end and back end, and it will not store any of that information anymore. It will be completely gone from the registry. So we do want to make sure that if we do make the decision to delete the record, we do so, and it's a definitive decision, because it will take some time, again, to put that record back on, especially if you don't have a copy of it already on the template. So now in terms of actually adding in a new record, and again this is the feature that hopefully many of you will want to use in the months and years to come with this registry. In the same way that you would go to access existing records, you would just go to surveys, and it will again take you to the same page. But instead of looking at this list of surveys, you'll just go to this blue button here that will say Create Survey, and it will take you to the full form. And what you will essentially be asked to do, if you choose to create a new record, is to follow the outline of the record and fill in as much as possible each of the variables. You will have an option to, well, I've just learned that you will have an option to save your work as you create a new record. So unfortunately in this version we didn't have that functionality, but it's since been added, I believe. But you'll be able to save your work, and then you'll be able to submit a record once you're done. Once you do fill out the form, there are some steps you'll need to take. Again, it's not necessarily the best way to manage the creation of new records, but this is the current solution that we've identified given the capacity of the IT company that we're working with to develop the registry. So whenever someone fills out the new record, and by that we mean making sure that each of the required metadata variables has a response provided and follows the guidelines and the help text that we provided. You then will need to manually go up to the draft or the status section, change it from draft to ready. Click on create and add another if you want to create a new record, or just create a survey if that's the only one you want to create, and that will save everything. And then you will need to send an email to this generic email that we've created for the cost action and the shock project, which are the two projects primarily linked to developing this registry, to notify the central team that you've created this new record and now it's available for review. If the record is left in draft, we won't look at it. We will only check records that have been marked as ready. There may be some back and forth that will go between the individual who created the record and us in the central team if we identify some variables perhaps where the information is miscoded or we weren't quite sure what you were doing. So just bear in mind that it might not be an instantaneous process where we will be able to validate the creation of a new record and put it up. It might require some collaboration from whoever entered in the record. But once it is validated, then it is very automatic. We just switch the status to publish, and that will automatically update everything on the back end as well as the front end. I do want to also highlight an additional feature when it comes to creating a new record, and this is more specific to surveys that might be part of a larger survey program. So for example, with the local multi-dem survey, it's been conducted in multiple countries, and instead of making someone create a completely new record and fill out the whole form, and what you saw is quite extensive, we have this clone survey button in place. So you just go to actions, clone survey, and you can use clone survey for any of the surveys, even the ones for which you don't have editing rights, because all it will do is create a new record that pulls the information that exists for the already existing record, embed it into the create survey form, and then what you can then do is modify the information in the variables that require editing on your end. So moving on to actually the metadata variables, and this is something that the central team will only have access to. So as you'll notice, there's a difference on the kind of welcome page in that in addition to the surveys tab, we actually have one that's called fields, and that's the terminology that is used on the back end to identify the metadata variables. Very similarly to the survey page, once you click on fields, it shows you all of the existing variables that we have. It is also designed in a way so you can quickly understand what each variable is. You can search for specific variables, and each variable comes with the option to view the specific details, edit it, and delete it. There's also an option to filter the variables if that's of interest to you. This is more just detailed information about what each of the specific descriptors are, but I won't go into too much detail about that. In terms of actually how you edit a variable, so once you click on the little pen and paper icon, you will be directed to a new page. It will pop up with a full form, and it has all of the different descriptors that we have for the metadata variable. And you'll have the option to edit or change the specific descriptors as you see fit. So it's quite small on that screen, so let me switch to the actual account, but I will have to switch user account. it'll look like this. And then to edit, you'll have the option to kind of modify the information as you want. And so for example, if we wanted to include this variable to be part of the advanced filtering, we would just click the box here. I won't do that, and then you would just click update field, and that would update everything automatically onto the front end. So everything that we've designed here is done, so it's quite instantaneous. Once we make a decision to change something, it is designed so it updates automatically. You can also have the option to create a new variable. So for example, if we learn that the users of the registry are interested in knowing about the specific survey results of the surveys that we have on our registry, and we create a new variable that is meant to provide a brief summary. This is where we would come to add in that variable, and then we would be able to then capture that information for all of the records. In the same way, we fill out the form so that each of the descriptors are filled in. We would indicate how we would want it to be displayed on the registry, and then that will automatically add in that variable for us. The one kind of caveat to this is for all of the surveys that do not, or all the surveys that are already up on the registry, if we were to add in the variable, then we would have to manually go in and add in that information if we wanted to make sure that they also have responses for this new variable. So that was kind of it in terms of the presentation of the backend and how we've set it up. Again, we've tried really hard to think about making the backend as user-friendly and intuitive, similarly to the front end, because we recognize that it's not just individuals who are regularly working with the survey metadata and the registry. It's going to require others from even outside the cost action to contribute. So hopefully you found it fairly intuitive and it's something that would be meaningful to contribute to yourself. And I'm very happy to receive any comments or questions, feedback you might have, because this, especially the back end, it's not quite as developed as the front end, so there is some flexibility in terms of how we can enhance it and make sure that it makes sense for all the different types of individuals interested in survey data. Thank you.